Hey everyone, welcome to this unemployment town hall. We're here to talk in the midst of this COVID-19 epidemic we're all struggling through, and in which so many people have lost their jobs, myself included, through no fault of our own. And what we're going to focus on today really is one of the industries that I work very closely in, which is the theater business, the Broadway theater business. And with me is a friend and really an extraordinary woman who is a senior advisor to the Biden campaign, Symone Sanders. Before we introduce our other panelists, I'm just going to, Symone first came to prominence in 2016. She was the national press secretary for Senator Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign. At 25, Symone became the youngest presidential press secretary on record and was named by Rolling Stone magazine as on the list of 16 young Americans who were shaping the 2016 election. She is a former chair of the Coalition for Juvenile Justice, Emerging Leaders Committee, and also a former member of the Federal Advisory Committee on Juvenile Justice. Symone is a former CNN political correspondent, or commentator. She served in 2018 and 2019 as a resident fellow at Harvard University's Institute of Politics at the Kennedy School, and also at the University of Southern California's Center for Political Future. So, hi, Symone. Really happy to be talking to you again, and feel honored to be sharing this this panel with you. And you're really here to going to tell us what we're going to do, folks. Is hear from three people who are my colleagues in the theater business, talk about their experiences with COVID-19, and they have some questions about for Symone, really, about what the Biden campaign and what a Biden administration would do to address some of the concerns that so many people right now in this country, particularly in our industry, are facing. So I just want to frame it before we really jump in to talk about the Broadway community, and to give you a sense of what our business kind of looks like. It seems like a big business, and it certainly is an incredibly important industry to New York. I think Broadway accounts for a very large number in terms of the GDP of New York City, and it is completely shut down. And not only are all of the workers, you come to the theater and you see someone like me on stage, but the people we're going to be hearing from really are the ones that make shows happen. And, there are hundreds of people that make a production happen. And then there are also ancillary businesses, small businesses that are impacted directly when a theater shuts down. So for me personally, I was in a show on Broadway until a little over a month ago. On, I think it was it March 12th, yes, when Mayor de Blasio, ordered the theaters be shut down. I got a call at 4:00 in the afternoon saying, "Do not, we're done. Our show's over. Come to the theater, clear out your dressing room, and everyone needs to be out by 8:00 tonight." And it was over. We're going to really hear from three people, as I said, who really do make the show go on, and I'll introduce them briefly, and then we can start talking. First is Pete Donovan, who is the head electrician for Phantom of the Opera. Pete, currently works for the Schubert organization, which owns a number of Broadway theaters, and he is the master electrician at the Majestic Theater, where Phantom is. He's a member of the IATSE union, which is the big craft union in the entertainment industry. You're a member of the IA's Craft Advancement Program. Pete's also a mentor in the Theater Workforce Development Program, which was developed by the Roundabout Theater Company and the union, the IATSE union. And so Pete will have some questions. We're also with us is Alvester Garnett, who is a Broadway percussionist and a very accomplished jazz musician. Alvester was the principal percussionist with Jazz at Lincoln Center All-Stars. He was the percussionist on the Tony-nominated Broadway production After Midnight. Alvester also worked on the show Shuffle Along on Broadway, and served as an appointee to the executive board of his, the union's Local 802 New York City from, I think, fall of 2017 to 2019. In 2018, Alvester was appointed by the New York City Council to the NYC Nightlife Advisory Board as a complement to the Mayor's Office of Nightlife. He has taught extensively for 10 years as part of the teaching artist faculty of the New Jersey Performing Arts Center, their arts education program, as well as the Jazz House Kids program of Montclair, New Jersey. Our other panelist is Jeannie Naughton. Jeannie is a theatrical wardrobe worker. Jeannie's what we call on Broadway a dresser, and Jeannie, she has worked for over 25 years in the wardrobe department on Broadway, having dressed actors like David Hyde Pierce and Victor Garber and James Monroe. How do you say James' name? Iglehart?
Iglehart.
Yeah, Iglehart, right. So Sting, among many, many others. Jeannie currently has been working on Hamilton, a show a lot of you might have, I'm sure, have seen. But she's left Hamilton, taking a leave of absence to dress Patti LuPone in the upcoming production of Stephen Sondheim's Company, which also has been put on hold because of COVID-19, which will hopefully be at the soon at the Jacobs Theater in New York City. So these were our three distinguished panelists, and let's start with Pete. Pete, I think why don't we start with you? Had some questions that you wanted to ask Symone, and I'll leave it to you guys for a minute.
Sure.
Hi, Pete.
Hey, Symone. Thank you so much for having me. I truly appreciate being here. That's a great opportunity. I guess with the ICAP committee that I've been on at the IA, and concerning all of Broadway and the greater industry, the entertainment industry, a big question of mine, and I'm sure it's on everybody's minds as we all go back to work. I've seen like a whittling away, it seems. You've seen the relaxing of OSHA standards for all workers as everyone's itching to get back to work. And as a department head, when I have to send my crew back to work, what do you think the federal government should do to bolster and ensure those standards remain strong? And in the future, how do we ensure that OSHA itself is fully funded to make sure those standards can be enforced?
So, Pete, thank you so much for your question. Tony, thank you so much for helping gather this group of illustrious folks that I like people are calling the gig economy, who are truly on, are suffering from this epidemic like so many people across this country. We've all been touched differently. And I hope that everybody's families out there are safe and healthy. Pete, I think you asked a really good question, because the reality is no one in this country should go to work and fear for their safety. Folks should be able to get up every day, go into their jobs, and understand that they are working in a safe and holistic work environment. But right now, so many people don't have that opportunity. And so before I get to the nitty-gritty of my question, my answer to your question, basically, I think I have one more follow-up question for you, if you will.
Sure.
What exactly, is there a level, I'm sure there has to be a level of anxiety that not just you have, but the folks that work for you have, right?
Absolutely. You're dealing with clearly audiences that are going to be in close proximity that violate our social physical distancing standards and ordinances that are happening now. But backstage, you have constant contact with people. In Jeannie's field, that discipline and craft and hair and makeup, you have people that are as close as medical professionals. So going forward, there has to be, provision for PPEs for workers and or clearly testing. We've spoken about that at a national level. Everyone's discussed that. But yeah, there's a psychological component to this as well. When workers go back, yes, they want a paycheck, but everyone does want to feel safe. They don't want to feel like they're being sacrificed at the golden altar, so to speak. We all understand the value the economy has and what role we play in it, but people do want to feel safe.
They want. It's important. It's the least one could ask. Actually, back in the Obama-Biden administration during the H1N1 epidemic, the Obama-Biden administration actually got with the CDC and the task force that was handling H1N1 to ensure that OSHA guidelines were being regulated, but also updated to ensure that folks knew what the guidelines and the regulations were so they were safe. Now, the reality is currently the Trump administration has not done everything it can to protect workers. President Trump likes to say he is a wartime president. And if that is the case, we have soldiers on the front lines without the necessary equipment to go into battle. We should never, Vice President Biden said recently, when he is president, he would never think of sending a soldier into war without the proper gear, without everything that they needed to be successful. But currently right now, we've got folks on the front lines all over this country who do not have what they need. And so Vice President Biden, even when he is elected president, he would ensure that OSHA guidelines are not only updated, but also ensuring that we're enforcing them, making sure that we are forming task forces within the CDC and within governments across the country and these state and local governments to ensure that folks feel safe, but they also have what they need. So this is a long game, and it's unfortunate and it's sad that there are people right now that do not have what they need. But I promise you, there are governors like Governor Cuomo in New York and Governor Whitmer in Michigan, and I know Governor Newsom in California have been working really hard to ensure that they not only get things like ventilators and PPE for folks who work in hospitals, but also ensuring that people like grocery store workers or, makeup artists and actors, people who are still going in some way, shape, or form, also feel protected and safe.
Great. Wonderful. That's critical moving forward for all workers, but definitely in our industry. And thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Pete,
thank you.
Did you have a second question, Pete, that you wanted to ask Symone?
Sure, I did. And it actually, I can reference this panel. If we look around, we've got, Tony, great actor on stage, Alvester, providing the music for these wonderful productions we do. And then Jeannie and I are backstage doing our best to make it happen. And, this is currently, it's a great microcosm for a giant industry in America, and it is currently stopped. So when it begins again, I guess, how does the federal government and how would a Biden administration provide direct assistance to prevent, the death of a great American industry that provides so much of America's art and culture? And case in point, if anyone doubts that, what's everyone doing during this shutdown? This, stay in place. We're all binge watching art, music, whatever we can get our hands on, all that content that's generated by this industry. And the people that provide that content will definitely need assistance moving forward.
Absolutely. I don't know what I would have done without Netflix, Hulu, and Apple TV Plus during this time. Tony, if I could just say one quick thing about this is that I think the reality is that American life as we know it has been transformed, and it will be for the foreseeable future. The way we interact with one another, the way we think about one another, when you enter into a space, is this safe? Should I be wearing a mask? Do I need gloves? I just touched the surface. But also what has been transformed and the lasting implications and impacts of this public health crisis are also this economic crisis we currently find ourselves in. So, Congress, they did a good first step. The CARES Act, the stimulus that was passed was a good first step, but there are things Congress has to get to working on now again to think about everything from student debt forgiveness to employers being able to receive funds so they can continue to pay their workers, ensuring that we are extending benefits for Social Security. So there is a lot we have to do. And, Vice President Biden has said from the beginning that he was in this race to restore the soul of this nation, but also rebuild the backbone of this country. And the conversation that we're having here today is about the backbone of this country. You just said it, Pete, we're all at home watching content that the artists such as yourselves have worked so hard to put together for us. So the least that we could do is have your back. And, Vice President Biden is committed to doing that for sure.
It's great to hear. Thank you.
let's let's turn to Alvester for a second. So Alvester, you're not only a musician, who plays in the pit on Broadway, which is what we call the area where when you see a musical where the extraordinary musicians who create play all the music for us. You're also a jazz musician and perform on all kinds of stages. Maybe I know you have some questions for Symone, and I'm really curious to hear that perspective.
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Tony, and thank you so much, Symone, for being here to listen to us.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. My first question relates to my peers that don't have I feel like the opportunities or perhaps the privilege to work on Broadway. There's a lot of contract workers out here on the music scene. And, unions are here to try to help all musicians, but in some states, we have laws, that protect them as employees, but many hiring venues still leave it to the band leader to be the quote unquote employer, and for the musicians to then work as contract workers without benefits like Social Security, healthcare, pensions, unemployment insurance, or even basic rights afforded all other workers by the National Labor Relations Act. What would a future Biden administration do to get musician contract workers better access to the safety nets that so many other citizens have?
Well, first of all, it's frustrating, right? Because the reality is people should not be punished, particularly in this moment. But I know that's how so many people across America feel right now, the world, frankly, actually. And it is gig workers, folks who are entrepreneurs, people who are actors and stagehands and artists such as yourselves, who have really been hit hard by the coronavirus, the pandemic. So one, Vice President Biden has long since said that it's super important, especially when it comes to pensions, for people who are union workers and non-union workers, that be protected. So he has backed legislation such as the Butcher-Lewis Act, which is an act that has not yet been passed by Congress, because let me tell you, the Republicans are holding it up. But that particular act would serve as a safety net. So if your pension were to ever be in trouble, it would allow one to apply for a low interest loan with the Treasury Department, so you can continue going forward and people are not held up. So there are a number of things I think we can do, but first and foremost, I just think the reality is right now we're kind of at a standstill. There are folks in Congress who are doing what they can, folks across the country, like governors, who are trying to, relax things for workers. I know that Governor Newsom, if you will, in California is really leading the way on some of this. They have instituted something that's called, I believe, an ABC test. And so an ABC test, let me just get it right, to more clearly define what it means to be a contractor or employee, so employers can't fudge the rules and cut costs. So Vice President Biden is committed as president to instituting a federal ABC test for all labor, employment, and tax laws. So workers like yourselves are not denied the benefits and protections they deserve. So that's just a little something he plans to do. But I'm just encouraged that there are folks right now who aren't waiting for Joe Biden to become president, like some of these governors, to do what they can and help lead the way.
Thank you.
Did you have a follow-up question, Alvester, or was that really what you wanted to ask?
Yes, I'd like to just to around some of the issues of, once again, about benefits and fair treatment. I know that, many working musicians were left behind by the $2 trillion CARES Act. Even though the arts industry contributed more than $760 billion to the U.S. economy in 2015, that's who we are here as a collective on this panel today, which is 4.2% of U.S. GDP. That's $760 billion, okay, in 2015, and employed 4.9 million workers. And this is according to our own government's National Endowment for the Arts. Still with this, many musicians lack that health care insurance that I spoke of, and even as the economy wraps back up, won't be able to return quickly to work due to tight workspaces, travel conditions. It's hard to get on a plane and travel and tour somewhere when you're worried about, catching some sort of illness, as well as audience limitations and venue scheduling systems, because a lot of our work is already canceled way into the latter part of this year and even into next year. What would a Biden administration do to make sure musicians receive benefits in a fair and equitable way throughout this economic crisis and recovery?
Well, I think this federal ABC test that Vice President Biden is committed to instituting as president, again, on the federal level, is really important because if we more clearly define who is considered a contractor or employee and ensure that that includes musicians, that includes, again, folks in the gig economy, those folks can be covered. Look, the CARES Act, it was a good start, but it was just a start. I think there is a reality and a realization, not just in Congress, but for people across the country, that there's more that needs to be done. And so let me read one thing for you that is super important. The Biden administration, the Biden administration. Look, y'all, I'm jumping ahead to 2021. Look, our campaign and Vice President Biden specifically has been urging the administration to do more. And there's a number of things, as you've heard Vice President Biden list off lists of things, especially when he had that call with President Trump that he talked about. But one important thing that we believe the administration should do, not just boost unemployment insurance, but ensure that we are taking care of folks so that employers can keep people on the payroll. It's a work sharing program. So it goes a little something like this. So a business keeps a worker on the payroll, right? But how can the business keep a worker on the payroll right now if everything is shut down? You know, how are you taking care of your folks, Alvester? How is Pete taking care of his workers right now? Well, under this plan, they do it at reduced hours, and the federal government makes up the difference in those wages. So the worker gets the same pay. Let me repeat that. The worker gets the same pay, because it's important. Because you know what? There are lots of folks out here that have yet to take a pay cut, okay? But there are people who have been living paycheck to paycheck, or folks who just can't afford to go 2-3 months without being paid. And so under this plan that we propose, you know, workers still get paid at their same level, but the burden on the business owner and the business is much less because the federal government is stepping in and giving a hand. So, you know, the Obama-Biden administration, shocker, has championed this approach. They did this. So it's something that has been done before, and something we really think the administration should take a look at, because this is about protecting workers, protecting people, doing what's best for the American people across the board. And frankly, the Trump administration has failed on that from the beginning of this crisis. So there are obviously a number of things they could do to, you know, kind of help us get back on track and just do a little bit better in this effort.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Great. So let's turn now to Jeannie. Jeannie, as I described earlier, you're a dresser on Broadway, and I can tell you as an actor, I probably literally would go on stage naked if it weren't, or certainly in the wrong clothes if it weren't for people like Jeannie, and to make sure that everything is taken care of. So it's a really important job, and you know, the camaraderie that develops with everyone backstage, I mean, the relationship between an actor and the dressers, and frankly the electricians and the musicians as well, is really profound, and you know, I know we all miss it a lot. So from your perspective, you know, I know you have a couple of things. Why don't you you know, put your questions to Symone?
Sure.
Hi, Jeannie.
Hi, Symone, and thank you, Tony and Symone, both for hosting this really important conversation. I hope it jumpstarts a lot of other important conversations across the country on these kind of topics, because I think now more than ever we need strong leadership and strong legislation to help our workers.
Agree.
My first question, I think, is piggybacking onto what Alvester was talking about with regard to pensions. As the economy seems to be struggling, and there are now over 22 million unemployed, what will Vice President Biden do as president to protect the pensions for all workers across this nation going forward?
Well, thank you for the question, Jeannie. I think I mentioned this earlier, but I want to double down on it, okay?
Please.
Vice President Biden truly believes, as he always says, he's been saying it from the beginning of this campaign, Wall Street didn't build this country, working class people did. Working folks built this country. People who are in unions and non-unions, labor helped build this country. And again, right now, people are scared. And so Vice President Biden absolutely supports a plan to ensure that people can keep their pensions, that they have the safety nets that they need. And as I spoke earlier about the Butch-Lewis Act, I don't know if folks know a lot about it, but the reality is that's something that could be helpful right now, and Congress has held it up. Congress has held up a number of things. I believe the Democrats are trying to do their job. The House has passed this, and the Senate has yet to take it up. So somebody need to call Mitch McConnell. And the reality is that under the Butch-Lewis Act, let me make sure under the Butch-Lewis Act, it would make sure that if your pension ever faces trouble, that you can get a low-interest loan from the Treasury Department to stay afloat. This is really important. I don't think it's something that people think about until this is at their front door and it's them. So Vice President Biden absolutely believes that we, one, should pass that bill, but also two, as president, that he would work with labor to, really institute some pension reforms.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
My follow-up question is that while Broadway seems to be rather a massive endeavor to most people outside of the business, it's actually a series of small businesses all working together. Beside each individual show, there are all the garment district workers, there are the dry cleaners, the costume and scenic shops, as well as the restaurants, hotels, and parking facilities that all work together to help the entertainment industry move. How will the Biden administration help those small businesses in the industry and beyond to stay afloat and grow stronger?
So small businesses are really the foundation of this country. And long before we were in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic, COVID-19, the Obama-Biden administration actually did a lot of work on small businesses. So now, Vice President Biden believes we have to double the Obama-Biden State Small Business Credit Initiative to, let me read this for you, it to $3 billion. And that would draw as much as $30 billion in private capital. I would argue that's something that we need to help jumpstart small businesses and keep them afloat and going to the next level all across this country. Now, right now, I think I read something the other day that said the federal government has run out of money when the money that was allocated to the small business program.
Yes.
Like, did anybody else hear that?
Yes, indeed.
It was to the small business program under the stimulus. So this is truly about management, right? Because Congress went and did their job. Congress's job was to pass the bill, to allocate the funds, and it is the administration's job to administer those funds. Joe Biden has done this before, okay? In the Recovery Act, it was Vice President Biden whose job it was to help usher and manage that Recovery Act. That means he was checking in with the folks whose job it was to watch the money. He was very, very involved in the process, and that's what the administration should be doing right now. The Trump administration has failed us in the leadership in this area. So it is unconscionable, right? That when I saw that push notification come through my phone the other day, I was like, what is going on here? This cannot be true. But it is the president's job to ensure that the CARES Act is being implemented swiftly, safely, and also in a way that ensures the longevity of the funds. But Congress is going to, obviously, I think there's a want and a need on the Hill to understand that they have to come back and do more. So we will see another reiteration of the CARES Act, another phase. But, Congress is trying to hold the president accountable. But the president has to understand that it is his administration's job to watch this money.
Thank you.
That's really interesting, Symone. One of the things that strikes me about listening to Jeannie's question and this idea of, individuals. I know, Jeannie, for example, you're doing, maybe you want to talk a little bit about what you're doing during so many people are trying to help in every way that they possibly can. Our unions are, really doing everything they can to support us. I know I'm trying to do everything I can. Jeannie, do you want to talk for a second? I know you're doing.
Sure, I'd love to. Theatrical Wardrobe Union, Local 764, like every other union in this business, we're used to the structure of the 6 day a week, 8 shows a week, always having that purpose and that driving, go to work. And we will all want to get back to work, but we want to do so safely. So while we've been self-quarantined, we've tried to turn our skills into helping the front line, if you will. I myself am working with a group here in Bergen County. I happen to reside in Teaneck, New Jersey, which is the epicenter here in New Jersey for the COVID-19. And I work with Bergen Mask Task Force, which is a group of dozens of volunteers, both within Local 764 as well as without, who all have sewing skills. And we have volunteered to make masks for all of the health centers that we are working with over 20 hospitals currently, care centers, and the police departments here in Bergen County to create masks that will help extend the life of the N95s that the healthcare workers are currently wearing. There's a shortage of PPEs, so we're trying to extend the usability of those N95s by sewing these masks. And we have a certain number of people that have clearance to bring them to these various hospitals here in Bergen County. So that's how myself and my daughter have been spending our days.
Oh my God, Jeannie. Let me just say, that's amazing.
Thank you.
And I think, I know, I mean, like truly amazing. Like, you know, my mother is a seamstress, actually. She was a seamstress for 16 years. And she sewed masks for my boyfriend and I and our family. And she's mailed them to us. I'm in DC.
Fantastic.
Yes, and I was very grateful. It's a little cheetah mask, so it works out well. But the reality is, like, you know, no, I'm sure nobody asked you to sew the masks, right? But you just felt like you needed to do it.
I wanted to support.
Tell me more.
Well, you know, I don't think we've been asked to do things like they were back in World War II when there were rubber drives and people really bound together with common purpose to help those on the front lines. Well, the people on the front lines currently are not our military, they're our healthcare workers and even our service workers. So the best we can do with the skills we have and this enforced time alone is to use the skills that we do have to try and support them so that they can do their jobs with the safety and comfort. So we just wanted the purpose, and this was an easy thing to do.
It's a wonderful thing. And there's someone or anybody, the thing that strikes me about this, and I'm, you know, that people are doing so much now and are reaching out, and but what I'm feeling a lack of, and I'd love to hear you reflect on this, Symone, is in terms of federal leadership, you know, from the White House, there are millions of people, you know, doing everything that they can. But the message in terms of what the plan is from an organizational point of view seems to change with every news cycle. And we do have a president now who really, to my perception, really responds only to what's happening in the current news cycle. And so we hear one thing one day and then the next day it's the opposite. And I wonder, you know, one of the things I've heard Vice President Biden talk about is a much more concrete kind of leadership where there's you know, there is a plan, there is a methodology, and you know, it's what Governor Cuomo's been doing every day. He says, this is the reality of what we're dealing with. He will explain it to us and say, this is what we are trying to do, and this is our goal, and it's quite clearly laid out. And I know every union is doing the same, and people like Jeannie are doing the same, and in our communities, we're doing everything that we can. But can you, Symone, from your perspective, talk a little bit about the importance of you know, organizational leadership from the White House? That's sort of like why is that so critical?
I mean, look, leadership starts at the top. I mean, what Jeannie was talking about, how her local has banded together to help find, like, literally make PPE for nurses and doctors and folks in the hospitals. And, you know, the president is standing in the White House and at one point in time told folks that the states need to figure it out on their own. Yeah. That is not the type of leadership that we deserve, but also that's just not the job of the president. The president should be the president of everyone. And, you know, Vice President Biden, that's why he said that, you know, this crisis is really a crisis of both confidence and competence. Do the American people have the confidence that the United States government is telling them the truth, that what they're hearing from the White House is in fact the truth, that they can trust what they're saying, that they can trust what they're saying about testing and vaccines? And it's a crisis of competence. Do the American people believe that the president and the folks around him have the competence and are competent enough, have the ability to carry out the task at hand? Now, praise the Lord for Dr. Fauci, okay? Thank the Lord for Dr. Fauci. And as Joe Biden has said, the president needs to just shut up and let the scientists lead. Let them speak. This is how we are going to get through this crisis. You know, when it comes to the CARES Act, for example, we were just talking about small businesses. Joe Biden has said that the administration should actually create a CARES implementation office and task force so that they are giving step-by-step guidelines and ensuring that folks know how to access the money and they know how to apply. So there is a roadmap for small businesses. You know, right now, people they don't know what to do. They don't know if more money is coming. So this is, it didn't have to be this way. And it did not have to be this way. And I am hopeful that it won't be this way for long. But I think what is encouraging is the fact that in the absence of leadership from the White House, everyday Americans have stepped up across the country. Governors and mayors and county commissioners have stepped up to fill that gap. But this is truly a crisis of confidence and competence. And, you know, I think President Trump is more worried about his poll numbers than he is about delivering the facts to the American people. And that's unfortunate. But I'm encouraged by you all on this call. And I'm just so happy that I work for Joe Biden. And I'm going to do everything I can to help get him elected, because when he takes office next year, there's going to be a whole host of things that we could have never imagined a year ago that need to be done. This crisis hopefully will have subsided a little bit, but there are still things that we'll have to take care of in terms of the economy. There are still things we have to take care of in terms of public health. We're in this for the long haul, ladies and gentlemen. So I think we're buckled down. We got to buckle up a little bit more, and everybody's going to have to do what they can. But, you know, I pray for the president. In the words of Speaker Pelosi, I pray for the president.
Yeah, you know, one of the real hazards of this obsession with the news cycle or response, you know, just dealing with things in such a short-term basis and shifting the information every day is what you talked about in January of 2021. I don't have any sense right now from our current leadership of what what the plan is going to be to get to rebuild this economy. You know, it's kind of like you know, when we invaded Iraq in 2003, I was pretty sure we'd win that battle, but no one was talking about, okay, once we go in there, you know, what Colin Powell said, you know, you buy it, you break it. And I feel that we're going to be looking at a similar thing when this crisis is over. There's going to be a massive amounts of thought that needs to be given in, you know, and so we do need a leader who's thinking ahead and talking ahead. And is there anything you wanted to share, Symone? Because I know I've that's the way that I've heard Joe Biden talk is in that forward thinking. Here's how I would do it. This is what I do. You know, when we were in the White House, we would assemble the experts in the Situation Room and, you know, get the best, you know, formulate a plan and then lay it out. And even in the Ebola crisis, that could have spread from West Africa so easily, and it was shut down and localized. You know, thank God, because that was an even more deadly disease. But is there anything you can talk about you know, the way the vice president thinks in terms of planning?
I mean, Vice President Biden, one, you know, he's obviously, he's in a different position than maybe a governor is in this country right now, right? Because the governors are dealing with this on the local level every single day, trying to figure out how to get the proper PPE for their citizens, you know, dealing with the fact that nightlife economies are shut down, dealing with the fact that, you know, cases are rising in some places, a lack of testing. And so Vice President Biden, the way he's approaching addressing this crisis is one, making sure he has the facts. And so he is on the phone every single day with his public health experts and his economic experts, doing a public health briefing and an economic briefing daily, literally every single day. I even believe he gets this briefing on Sundays. And then these briefings inform you know, kind of what his plans are. So we put forward early on, we put out a make it work checklist. And this is a checklist of all the things, if you will, that the Trump administration could and should be doing to truly, make the implementation of the CARES Act work. We put out a list, if you will, of kind of what types of things needed to be seen in the CARES Act, in the stimulus. What should the Trump administration be doing as it relates to testing? The Trump administration, they said we would have all these tests and everybody who wanted a test would be able to get a test, and we found that's just not true. I'm sure we all know somebody who has maybe felt like they have the symptoms, who has tried to go and access, go to their healthcare provider and access testing, and they've been turned away. Yes. Or they've been told to self-quarantine, right? If you feel sick, self-quarantine. And for some folks, that's just not enough. And so Vice President Biden, I guess how he thinks about this, leading with science, being practical, telling the American people the truth, but also being a voice for those people who are on the front lines. And so when I don't know, did y'all hear that he called, he and President Trump had a phone call a couple of weeks ago, or all my weeks run together, but it wasn't that long ago, but it wasn't last week. They had this phone call, and Vice President Biden used his time on the phone with President Trump to talk about what he's hearing from folks on the ground. Every day, he tries to talk to a real person. So he's also talking to governors. He's also talking to, Vice President Biden is also talking to mayors. But, he has an opportunity to get on the phone with a firefighter, with a nurse, with somebody who's a grocery store worker, someone who is a small business owner that is not getting the relief they need and is afraid to have to shut their doors. And he took all that he's hearing from folks and spoke to the president about it, said that he has to do what he can for testing, but he also has to operationalize the Defense Production Act for everything, not just ventilators. Jeannie is making masks because the Trump administration has not made anybody else make masks. Vice President Biden would ensure that he was operationalizing and activating the Defense Production Act for everything from ventilators to PPE, but also to banks, so that folks that need these small business loans are able to access them more quickly and are pushed to the front of the line. So he's thinking about this, really just this gets to the heart of who he is. I think in this moment, what I've heard from y'all on the phone is, in addition to policy, and you want a government that actually works and someone that is delivering results for you, I think what you're missing is empathy. And what I don't hear from President Trump, and I don't think millions of people across America hear from him when he stands at the press podium and addresses the people, of empathy, is an understanding of the death that has taken toll, of the trauma that people are experiencing. And what I think folks appreciate about Vice President Biden is he uniquely understands what the American people are going through. And he uses his time to connect with folks. So I've watched him do roundtables. He did a roundtable just a week ago with folks on the front lines, nurses and firefighters. And one of the nurses was self-quarantining because she had been exposed to someone with the coronavirus. And we stopped the roundtable, and he took time to talk to her about what she was feeling, what she was experiencing. How did she feel folks in the workplace handled it? She was a nurse. She had been exposed and treating someone, and she didn't have the proper PPE. And had she had the right mask, the right gloves, had she not been reusing a mask, if she wasn't wearing a trash bag instead of a gown, perhaps she wouldn't have been self-quarantining. Perhaps she wouldn't have contracted the coronavirus. So Joe Biden understands that in this moment, what people are looking for is leadership. Not just in terms of like what the federal government should be doing, but also in terms of empathy, emotional leadership. And I hope folks feel like that's what you're getting from him.
That's such an important point, because it gets back to what I said about the role of executive leadership. Particularly at any time, but particularly in a time of crisis, we really see the fault lines right now and the impact of the lack of the ability to bring people together. When you have the divider in chief as opposed to the uniter in chief, that sounds like a sentimental concept. Except, what we're seeing now is a high degree of chaos and disunion when people really need to be pulled together. Both, and empathy is a very powerful, important force. And, so that to coordinate efforts and have everyone work together, it just seems I mean, maybe it's sort of what you're saying, so I don't know if you want to comment on that, or if Alvester or Pete or Jeannie, you want to comment on what that would mean to you. And I know both you guys are all active in your unions too, and what it means to your fellow workers. And I'm just curious to hear.
Yeah, how are y'all feeling in this moment? Like, we talked about the anxiety and just the gravity of the moment that we're in, but I mean, from what I've heard, each of you in red, each of you are stepping up, and your unions are stepping up in their own ways to truly fill gaps in this crisis. So, like, thank you first and foremost.
Thank you.
Well, I think most people coming out of our collective shock from Broadway and all of the arts being closed down so suddenly and so broadly are starting to find purpose to move forward. But there is the feeling of being very dependent on the unemployment benefits, on the stimulus bill, on the mortgage payment deferral programs, on the car insurance rebates, on every little lifeline that is available currently, so that you can keep moving forward with what this new normal is. And that's a little unsettling. A lot of our time is just kind of finding our legs going through this next chapter in our lives, and watching our children do remote learning and adapt to that, and adapt to remote play dates. And you start to worry about their social development moving forward when they don't have, thankfully they have parents here in the house. My daughter is an only child, but you do start to think about, how long will this go on, and what will the ramifications be going down the line? And in terms of Broadway, we're so used to, Broadway is an economic driver. For New York State, I think alone, $14.6 billion in revenue for the state. Over 96,000 workers affected just in this business. But beyond economics, there's the human toll. We in Local 764 have lost a few members. In Pete's show, Jennifer Arnold, God rest her, Josh Walwork from Law and Order, SVU. We lost them before their time. And we know many others who are currently either in self-quarantine or in hospital or in ICU. On top of that, Broadway has always been an uplifting experience for people. It's an important part of our cultural fabric, not just in the United States, but throughout the world. When people think of theater, I think they automatically think of Broadway as the pinnacle, the top. And it's something that needs to be protected. And I'm not sure that the current administration has an appreciation for that. They've certainly done their best to defund the National Endowment for the Arts and other arts programs. And I just think coming out of this, certainly people are going to need theater again for its catharsis, for its uplift, for its way of making us think differently about the human condition. I'll be interested to see what kind of plays come out of this time in our lives, what kind of music will be written because of this time in our lives. And the unique thing about Broadway too is that, to quote one of my shows, you literally have to be in the room where it happens to be part of the transportive magic of it. And we backstage are grateful to be part of that magic, and we desperately want to get back to creating that. And I think part of it now is that yearning for purpose, and to get back to those families who we saw 6 days a week, who are an extension of the families that we're quarantined with now. So it's kind of like the 5 stages of grief. You go through a little bit of shock, a little bit of anger, a little bit of denial, perhaps a little depression, and then you try to find your footing again. And I think that people are at different stages of that right now, and we're just trying to all collectively work our way through together.
Jeannie, if I can sort of, I don't mean to interject here.
Please.
But to what you're saying, and Symone, to what the point you were making earlier, federally, it feels like it's a rudderless ship, to be honest. And so certainly on Broadway, and I know this to be true in other industries, but I can see it here. We'll be back. The paychecks have stopped, but we haven't. This is just a long intermission. Mm-hmm. And as you all know, during intermission, the work doesn't stop. We all, Jeannie, you've clearly been, grab the bull by the horns, and you guys are getting done what should have been done already. But you've stepped in this situation, and it's up to everybody to continue and move forward. As I look forward, we haven't stopped. Local 1 that I belong to, I'm very proud to belong to, we have a training, education, and technology fund that's still active currently. The International has the Training Trust Fund, which is very active, the ICAP committee. And I'm fortunate enough to be part of a great program that the IA and Roundabout Theater Company put together. And it's the Theater Workforce Development Program. And what that does is reaches out to city kids who have an interest in technical theater and may not know the best way forward. And we're going to meet on Monday online, because this will begin again. Like I said, when intermission's over, we'll start again. It's just, we certainly, as Jeannie said, we're looking for leadership, which is, in the meantime, we have to get the job done that we were assigned.
Yeah, because, the America, Lester, did you want to add to that?
Well, I mean, for me, I think listening to what both of you have mentioned about, education and dealing with children, for me, it's been a transition into doing more teaching at home, but it's been a tremendous struggle switching into the whole Zoom world and, the pitfalls that comes with that. I'm a drummer, and the technology that's there is really hard to teach other drum students, because it thinks the sound of the instrument is noise, and it just literally cuts us out. So there's settings that have to be adjusted. Then it comes to a point of the questions of access. Not every child has the same type of equipment. Not every child some homes might only have one device. So then it becomes, well, at least I can see them. At least we can be together. And I get a lot of, I'm very touched when parents send me messages saying, wow, you pulled more out of my child in that 1 hour today than I've gotten out of them the whole week. So that means a lot to me. I'm kind of angry that, that we're at this point, and we're, like you said, it's like a rudderless ship. It didn't have to be this way, I think. If things had been dealt with earlier on. See, I witnessed it back in January when I lost a whole 4 weeks of work in Shanghai. So that was devastating for me. I know plenty of musicians that are in that situation where work was being destroyed before we really got a taste of it here in the U.S., because there's so many of us that work on an international scale. Yes, I've worked on Broadway, but me and a lot of my peers that also work on Broadway, because sometimes we sub out, we take tours, do things like that, because we love the art. I mean, we become like ambassadors, with what we do with this music, and it's an American ideal that we send out across the world, whether it be Broadway or jazz or classical or country music. It's something that's really powerful with what we have to share with the world, and then to see it come to be stopped in such a way when it could have been dealt with in a better way. It's really frustrating to me. But I know that I love what you said, Pete. It's like there's an intermission here. And at the same time, in intermission, you can fix some things too. You can try to regroup. You can say, okay, we're going to do this better. We learned something from something that happened in the first act. And sometimes the first act that you've done 500 times, all of a sudden that little twist comes at you. And you say, hey guys, let's try to do this better. I don't feel like we're getting a lot of feedback about how to do things better, with this current leadership. And I'm finding amongst our small community, we are figuring out ways to do it better. But from the top down, the examples are not there. I hope that we can continue to look at each other and find inspiration.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Certainly we know it in our industry, but I think all over this country, Americans generation to generation have shown that, we are innovators. We're incredibly hardworking. The community is so important. People do come together and do what needs to be done in incredibly inspiring ways in times of adversity. And it's painful to see all of that happening kind of on an ad hoc basis. And what I'm excited about when this, in hopefully in a few months' time, is to have leadership in Washington that kind of, to have a real cheerleader of empathy, not just a promoter,
Yes.
and a self-promoter, which is, clearly with President Trump, everything is in relationship to himself, and every one of his press conferences is a promotional opportunity of like, look how great I am, look how great we're doing, and meanwhile, people are dying and certainly struggling, and the optimism that you guys have expressed in all three of you in this conversation really is the character of this country, and I'm personally super excited to have this conversation and to think about, wow, what would it be like to have a leader who who truly expresses empathy and has this very proven ability to kind of bring people together and in a practical way kind of rally the forces to get something done according to a plan. I don't know, Symone, if you want to, our time's running out here, but I wonder if you want to kind of bring that idea home.
Look, Vice President Biden has a detailed plan to address the issues that we're facing right now. He's got the experience to get this done. He managed the $800 billion Recovery Act. And I know we wish we had him in office right now. But this fall, we have an opportunity, honestly. In every single way, Vice President Biden is the opposite of Donald Trump. In terms of experience, in terms of expertise, in terms of leadership, in terms of empathy, the exact opposite. So I know that folks across the country are hurting right now. And in the absence of leadership from the White House, people are stepping up in their everyday lives to do what they can. But there are some things that we don't have to wait till January 2021. There's some things that we can do right now. Congress has to take care of small businesses in this next reiteration of the legislation that they pass. They have to ensure that we're protecting Social Security, that we are expanding unemployment benefits, but we're also making it possible for employers to keep their workers on the payroll, that we have to get the PPE that we need. There should not be a shortage of masks and gloves in this country. Nurses should not be putting on trash bags. Makeup artists should not be wondering if it's safe to go to work. So look, I'm encouraged. And I think Vice President Biden has said it over and over and over and over again, that we are the United States of America. We are the greatest country in the history of the world, and there is nothing we cannot do if we come together. We can do this. And Vice President Biden is ready to lead on this issue, and he's not waiting. He has been a voice for folks on the front line. He's being a voice for what needs to happen right now, but also what will need to happen come next year. So I'm just really encouraged by this conversation. I know I can speak for the Vice President when I say thank you. Thank you for all you all are doing. Thank you for raising your voices. Thank you for having this conversation with us and being so engaging and transparent. And we will be on the other side of this sometime soon. And when we are, I think we will all be able to look back and think of how we expanded acts of kindness, think of how we got innovative and creative and crafty. But also, I hope that we'll remember that this was a crisis of leadership, and it did not have to be this way. And had the current president of the United States done a little bit more to protect American workers, just worked a little bit harder to manage the stimulus money from the CARES Act, we might be in a different position than we are right now. Mm-hmm. But we can get this done, ladies and gentlemen. And we thank you for your support, but also your partnership, because it's going to take all of us.
Absolutely.
Well, that's good. Well, thanks, Symone, and thanks, Jeannie and Alvester and Pete for joining this really important conversation, and for all of you who are watching. I'm optimistic, and we will get through this. And as Symone said, this is an opportunity we have now. Mm-hmm. So that brings our unemployment town hall to a close, and I just think this is such a great format. What a good idea. So
what a good idea. Can we say thank you to Tony?
Yeah,
okay,
Tony.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Symone.
Thank you, Tony.
People out there, I really don't think people out there understand how much. I mean, I know Tony is a powerhouse on screen and on stage, but he's also a powerhouse off stage. And he truly, truly cares about the issues. You know, he is a guru when it comes to advocating for state legislatures. That's how we first met. But he truly cares about folks and is committed. And I think that in this day and age where so many of us are looking for ways to feel connected and where we can't physically be together, some people are struggling on how to, you know, make their voices heard in this moment. I think each of you, and Tony especially, is a good example of how we can contribute to this little thing called democracy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Symone. I really appreciate that. And
Thank you.
and thanks to everybody for joining the conversation. Let's keep it going.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
guys.
Thank you.